Hello, I'm Chad Lucas, and today I'm going to read you the first chapter of my latest novel, The Vanished Ones. Chapter 1. The chapel windows rattled in the banshee howl of the north wind. Darian leaned forward in the pew, trying to focus on the apostle in the pulpit. The preacher raised his voice to be heard over the storm. "We will be tested and tried tonight," he declared, lifting his hands toward the heavens. "But we must stand firm in our faith, no matter the cost. To surrender everything, even your very life, to the service of God, that is the highest calling and the greatest honor." The leader of the mission on the hill was a tall man with a mane of white hair and a voice so deep and strong it was easy to believe he channeled the words of God. Normally his presence commanded stillness, whether he was preaching in the chapel or walking the halls of the mission with the clop of his black cane announcing his steps. But tonight, the room was awash with nervous energy, bouncing knees, squirming bottoms, fingertips drumming against the wooden pews. Even the brothers kept glancing toward the windows as lightning flashed and thunder rumbled outside. Darian didn't understand why everyone was so on edge. He was one of the newest trainees in the Order of the Right Hand, having moved from the elementary dorm on the mission grounds into the main house when he turned 13 in the summer. He'd spent the past 2 months trying to decipher the unspoken rules among the older trainees. Why wasn't a welcome question at the mission. He had learned that young. Things were as they were, honed by the order over generations or handed down directly from God, and it wasn't his place to question that. Darian had also learned not to draw too much attention to himself. When the service ended, the first trainee who opened the chapel doors yelped in shock as he was immediately soaked by a torrent of rain. The others braced themselves before sprinting into the battering downpour. As Darian approached the doorway, shivering in anticipation of the soaking he was about to receive, he felt a large hand on his shoulder. He looked up at Gregor, a hulking boy 2 years older and a foot taller than him. They worked together in the kitchen on morning breakfast duty. "Some of us were smart enough to bring raincoats," Gregor said, smiling. "Come on." He pulled up his hood and opened his coat to hold one side over Darian's head. Darian ducked under Gregor's armpit, and they awkwardly lumbered across the yard. Darian's feet were quickly soaked, but Gregor and his coat kept the rest of him mostly dry. "Thank you," he said when they reached the main house. Gregor slipped out of his coat and shook off the rain with a flourish. "My pleasure," he bowed, drawing a smile from Darian. The levity was short-lived as the trainees herded into the dining room, where the brothers served herbal tea. Around the room, boys hunched in wet, miserable silence as they sipped their tea before filing off to bed. Once Darian was safely in his third-floor dorm, he couldn't stifle his curiosity any longer. "Why is everyone so afraid tonight?" he asked his roommates as they changed into their pajamas. An icy quiet fell over the room. Darian winced. He should have chosen his words more carefully. Trainees of the order were expected to control their emotions, so his question had sounded like an accusation. "You know what tonight is, right?" snapped Pish, a boy 2 beds away, with unruly reddish-blonde hair and freckles dotting his cheeks. "It's the vanishing." "That's real?" Darian exclaimed. He had heard several versions of the story over the years. Every fall and spring, within a week of the equinox, a terrible storm blew across Rhodenroode Island. Rumor held that on the night of the seasonal gale, one of the trainees always disappeared. But Darian had assumed it was a story the older boys made up to scare the younger ones. Such stories abounded on the island, an isolated colony thousands of miles from the homeland. With little connection to the outside world, the boys at the mission on the hill filled in the gaps with imagination. Growing up in the elementary dorm, Darian had heard tales of sea beasts stalking the depths off the coast, causing shipwrecks. Creatures of the air that hunted at night, large enough to carry off cattle or children. Legions of horrors in the wildlands to the south, beyond the mountain range that split the island in half. They all seemed like exaggerations, if not complete fictions, and the brothers frowned on these tales as distractions from the faith. But that didn't stop them from spreading. The fear he had sensed in the chapel felt real, and so did the solemn expressions on his roommates' faces. "It's true," Pish insisted. "Remember Callan, who used to work in the library? Last fall he—" "Let us not speak of this tonight," said Ivek, the oldest and unofficial dorm leader. He rubbed a hand over his closely shaved head. It's time for bed. Yes, keep a stiff upper lip and pretend everything's fine, just as the order demands. Lowry, the next oldest, pressed his hands together as if praying, in a mockery of Ivek's grave tone. Ivek scowled, folding his muscular arms across his chest. Before he and Lowry could start bickering, Darian blurted another question. If it's real, how come the brothers don't warn us about it? Ivek tilted his head. Did you not listen to the apostle's message? Darian blushed. He recalled the apostle speaking of tests and trials, as he and the brothers often did, but he'd never said, one of you will disappear tonight. Satisfied that the discussion was over, Ivek extinguished the lamp and the boys settled in their beds. They lay in silence, listening to the scream of the wind. Darian's mind raced. The vanishing was real? Did that mean one of his 6 roommates might disappear in the night? Did it mean he might disappear? How was it even possible? He'd heard multiple theories. Most blamed the Eastern Cloister, a group that had split from the Order generations ago and left West Rhodenroode to start their own heretical sect on the island's east coast. But other speculations included pirates, Yabaland raiders, evil spirits. The wind briefly lulled, and another sound drew Darian's attention. A gulp, a soft sniffle. Someone was crying. Darian's throat tightened. His instincts told him to go to the weeping boy, whoever it was, but he knew they would hate that. Worse, they would be angry with him for drawing attention to their emotion. So he tried to pretend the muffled sniffs were part of the storm, as the others were doing. He turned to the one thing he could control. He prayed, mouthing familiar words to himself. God, by your sovereign right hand, grant us the bounty of this land. Why do you let this happen? The intrusive thought jolted him, and he tried to push it away. Of all the whys a mission trainee was supposed to avoid, questioning the wisdom and strength of God was top of the list. How could any mere mortal, let alone a child, claim to know better than the Almighty? Brother Pfeiffer posed this rhetorical question whenever a boy asked a troublesome why during lessons. Sometimes he asked it softly, with one eyebrow arched. Other times it was a thundering judgment, depending on the insolence of the inquiry. But questions poked at Darian now, like mosquitoes whining in the dark, invisible yet inescapable. Why? His heart raced. He was dangerously close to questioning the providence of God. I'm tired, he thought desperately. Tired and scared. I'm letting my emotions control me. Forgive me. I didn't mean it. What does the sacred word say? Though evil flourish in the dark of night, righteousness shines forth with the coming of the light. I just need to hold on until morning. Morning seemed an eternity away, and he doubted he would ever fall asleep. But even as he thought it, a wave of fatigue washed over him, and his eyelids drifted shut. Thanks for listening, and if you'd like to pick up The Vanished Ones, it's in stores now and also available on audiobook.